Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to talk about why your superheat changes when you have clean coils, clean air filters, from your understanding, good airflow, no problems with ducting sizes or anything like that, high static that would cause a liquid to not boil off at that evaporator coil and return back to a liquid. If everything seems to be fine, why is your superheat still changing from point A to point B, from inside to outside? What could be contributing to that? And stay tuned, and we're going to go over that, and I hope that helps you out. Behind me, I have a diagram of a compressor, suction line, discharge line, and we've got a couple questions here. Why is my superheat zero? Why is vapor no longer present? If I have, gas coming back to my compressor and we're pumping that refrigerant in that state, why did it go to a liquid state? Why is it no longer gas? Why is it now a liquid state? Why did we lose the oil out of this compressor? Why did our compressor fail? Okay, compressors are designed to pump refrigerant in a vapor state. They are not designed to pump refrigerant in a liquid state. And if they were, then it'd be a totally different ball game. But we have oil that is there to lubricate scroll plates, and if we lose that oil because liquid is returning back to the compressor, then what we could expect is a mechanical failure to happen. So it's our job to make sure these compressors don't die. If you can't keep a compressor alive on a residential 5-ton and below unit, then imagine when you're working on hospital grade equipment. Imagine when you're working on industrial grade equipment. Things that are far larger than a 5-ton and more than one compressor that are tied to each other in tandem. What happens if you lose oil there? Well, that's a very large mechanical issue. On that scale, you could be knocking off 50 to 100 tons. You could be knocking off an entire floor of a building. You can be putting delicate equipment that is there, like MRIs and stuff like that put out a lot of heat, have to have chilled water going to it. You can take a lot of things down simply by not having oil in a compressor. So it's very important to understand superheat, because it's vital for that compressor to be able to run and have it properly lubricate the internal mechanical parts inside that compressor. If that oil's not present, then you're going to have excess friction. You're going to wind up killing the compressor, and it's not designed to pump anything but refrigerant in a vapor state. And so a lot of times we get confused on, why did my compressor die mechanically? Why did it fail? Why did I have a low superheat or no superheat, going into my compressor? Especially if you read a positive superheat at the evaporator coil. And why are you in a negative superheat here? It doesn't make sense. And a lot of times people just don't look at the journey that the refrigerant line takes. And what I'm talking about, in that journey, we have an evaporator coil here. We have a condenser here. And the line set, because we have a suction line and a liquid line, as that line set travels sometimes through chases, through big plumbing pipes that are underneath the slab, underneath that concrete foundation. You have a drain line in there too, a lot of times. And, we don't look at, how this line set is moving from point A to point B and what could cause that temperature change. Why is the armor flex, the black insulation, on the suction line? Why? And when it's not there, what could happen? I've seen where these liquid lines and these suction lines, they rub together. and they create refrigerant leaks. You know, and have that armor flex there, it does protect against that. It's an extra layer of protection, so it's not skin on skin, right? Also, you know, if this refrigerant line is going to be going through a chase and that armor flex is not present, that line can still sweat, and over years it could accumulate enough water to, um, you know, throw off these vapor readings that we're measuring called superheat. At the end of the day, you know, the chase could even fill up with water if there is a problem with the drain line. Sometimes when you go to look at these drain lines, they're not draining water, but your evaporator coil's condensating and your pan is filling up with water, and it's going out. It's not backing up, but outside it's bone dry. If you're in that situation, then most likely the chase is full of water. If that chase is full of water, then we are going to throw off the superheat reading. Whatever my superheat reading is here, it will be different here. And that's what we're talking about. So if we were to talk about water in the chase, you know, say there's our chase. This would represent, you know, the drain line, the suction line, and the liquid line. It goes into the chase, and this chase, obviously, it would be sealed on outside and inside. And this would be what we call a dry chase, because there's nothing in that chase that could change the state of this refrigerant. So if I had vapor on this line, you know, coming back from my evaporator coil, and say this chase was full of water, for example, then the temperature reading that I have here and the temperature reading that I have here are going to be off. They're going to be different. And then a lot of times what happens when we're hooking our gauges up to our service ports, we don't know these chases are full of water. So you're making pretty much all your choices that are available to you based off of those readings. So your suction pressure, your high side pressure, your saturation temperatures, your superheats, your suckles, all of that is changing. Now your subcool, that's not going to change, because out here you're trying to condense, right? Obtain subcooling, that liquid line having liquid refrigerant in it. If it's going through a chase that's full of water, then the refrigerant in that sealed copper pipe, it's just going to remain liquid on the other side, right? It's not going to boil off going through there, right? So that's not going to hurt anything. It's going to guarantee that you have liquid here. So it's actually, you know, you may even be cooler here than you are over here. You may come in with a 2-degree subcool, 4-degree subcool, and you may, before you even get to your evaporator coil, you can be 8 or 9 degrees cooler. That's not the problem. The problem is after we boil that liquid off, as we come back on all our tubes, as we come back on all of our tubes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tubes, right? You know, at our different superheats, right? Then collectively our superheat here, you know, it being a guaranteed vapor leaving, now it can go through this chase that's full of water that can be at 40 degrees. Why is it 40 degrees? Well, think about it. If I have a problem with this drain line and I'm draining into the chase, filling the chase up with water, well, the temperature of the water coming off of this coil, it's going to be pretty close to 40 degrees, okay? The exact temperature is irrelevant, but it's super cold, and at the end of the day, it's going to be colder than the refrigerant that's inside the pipe. Coming through this chilled 40-degree chase, as we go through there, coming out on the other side, we're going to have no superheat. So we could have superheat here, right, where we're guaranteeing that we're in a vapor state, but over here we can now be in a liquid state. The refrigerant could have cooled back down, condensed back down to a liquid. And that's how, and sometimes you see these pipes are just iced up coming out of the ground. If you ever see them frosty coming out of the ground, it's because that chase is full of water. And then what happens if we're not seeing that frost? Even if we are, sometimes you're just basing everything off of a suction pressure. The first instinct is when I see a low suction pressure, or if I see um, a problem where it indicates that I might need to add refrigerant, what's the first thing to do? You start changing the charge. So if you're looking for pressures only, which is not good, you're going to wind up adding refrigerant, and the problem's only going to be bigger. You're going to wind up killing the compressor. Let's just say, um, that the system had a low superheat, and you measured a low superheat. Well, if you're a good technician, but you didn't quite understand that there could be water in the chase, you see a low superheat, the first thing you do with a low superheat is you wind up removing refrigerant. Or you might even come in here and go, well, I got a low superheat. Do I have an airflow issue? Is my coil clean? Do I have good air filtration? Am I turning at the right RPMs on my motor? Is my speed correct? Good CFMs? All of that. If all of that checks out, and then you go, man, my superheat just won't change. You're in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that the system is overcharged. What you want to do is you want to measure your superheat here. Now, the difference between the superheat measured here and the superheat measured here, I'm going to take that last step out. If you have no water in the chase, you shouldn't have any differential, right? Because, you have armor flex insulation on all your copper, and that's helping you keep the same temperature from the air handler all the way to that condenser, right? That's so when we hook our gauges up, we don't make any changes that aren't necessary because we're relying on accuracy. And so if I'm relying on accuracy, and the accuracy that I'm talking about is 12 to 18 degrees, that's a small threshold, right? We have 6 degrees that we're working with here on high temp applications, air conditioning, right? And so if below 10 is not good and above 25 is not good in most cases, then between 12 and 18 is pretty much almost textbook. Then what I'm looking for is to not change in that window. So having armor flex, having that insulation on that copper pipe going through that chase, that's a huge deal, because I don't want to have, say, 14 degree superheat here, and then outside I'm reading maybe a 18 degree superheat here. Is that enough for me to make a change if I'm looking for 12 to 18? No, but the next time I check it, maybe I'm not 18 anymore. Maybe I'm 30 one day, and if I'm a 30 superheat, then maybe I'm going to say, oh, I need to add a little bit of refrigerant. The moment I add a little bit of refrigerant, I'm waiting for the number to change on this side, but realistically, the number is even lower over here. And so we want to make sure these numbers are the same on both sides. So how do you know if there's water in the chase? A very simple way of doing that is you can take your thermal clamp, right, and you can clamp it right here at your evaporator coil, and you can measure what that temperature is, right? And say that temperature there says, let's just say it says 58 degrees, and out here it says 58 degrees. Well, then I know that my chase has no water in it. But let's just say that over here I read, 58 degrees. But over here I read 40 degrees. Well, how did I lose 18 degrees through my chase? The only way I can do that is if there's water in the chase that's very cold, much colder than the temperature of that pipe leaving the evaporator, and it has cooled down everything. And now out here, I've lost superheat. I'm leaving here in a vapor state. I will return to my compressor in a liquid state. And you know what? You could have a brand new air conditioning system that you just installed, and the chase was full of water, and it might have had, let's just say, 30 or 40 gallons of water in it. And guess what? You put a brand new system in, and within 2 months or 3 months, you lose a compressor. Somebody goes out there, they put a compressor in, 4 or 5 months later, you lose that compressor. and it's just a warranty nightmare, and the customer's upset, and they're blaming manufacturers, they're blaming the companies, and honestly, it's nobody's checking to see what my superheat is, and if I'm starting up and I have a good superheat on startup, it's probably because that water's not been chilled down because there's been no fresh condensate water added to it, or these pipes chilling that water down. So, I mean, it's almost acting like a chiller barrel in a way. But, at the end of the day, if you're losing compressors and your superheat is changing, and, you don't have that consistency, then, the only thing that would make sense is to start checking the journey that your copper is going from point A to point B. I'm going to go ahead and take some of these steps out, and let's just say we had no chase. Let's just say that these lines were just running, um, you know, in a different direction, where you're maybe going down, you're going across an attic, and across that attic, that attic warms up to about a good 120, 130 degrees in the middle of summer, sometimes warmer than that, depending on your region. The insulation that you have on that copper is probably not half-inch wall, probably 3/8 wall, probably thin. It may be even bare in a few areas where it's sweating. And in some cases, maybe there's no insulation at all. By the time it starts to go out the eave and down the side of the structure, the building, the house, whatever, maybe the insulation, if it was there, it's dry rotted, it's no longer there, or it never had it on there. Critters like to climb up that, so they're clawing at it, they're eating it, whatever they're doing. At the end of the day, it's missing a lot of insulation, or there is none. Now you have heat index directly affecting the temperature of that copper as it journeys down, that structure, that building. So you're losing your temperature that you had at your evaporator coil, and you're gaining much more. So it's not bad in the sense of liquid returning back to the compressor, liquid refrigerant that is, like water in a chase will do. Instead, you're going to read a high superheat, and you're going to read a high superheat because the maybe you had a 14-degree superheat at the evaporator coil, but by the time that journey went across that hot attic, and that insulation wasn't present on that copper pipe, and by the time it went down the side of the building and there was no insulation on that pipe, it heated up with the heat index, and how hot the surrounding ambient air is. All that is adding more superheat to it, right? So your refrigerant, your compressor is going to love it. It's not going to really care. The pressures aren't going to change, but your superheat's going to be extremely high, and you're guaranteed to return back in a vapor state. So that's not bad. But what if you were looking for superheat and you saw like a 35-degree superheat? You're going to go, oh my gosh, there's a problem here. Now your client might be spending money in the wrong direction fixing their issue. Instead of just insulating the copper pipes and balancing the charge right, they may be changing out valves that you're saying are bad that aren't. They may be paying for Freon that you're putting in the system to try to bring those numbers down. And you may say, you know what, by the time I added that valve, and by the time I tweaked these charges, or by the time I just added refrigerant, I did drop my superheat, because you're going to. You may flood out your evaporator coil with liquid refrigerant and bring it down to zero, and by the time it gets to the service valves outside, if it went across that hot attic and down that side of the building with high heat index temperatures and high ambient temperatures, it may be in the right superheat range. But then the next day you go back out there, or the following morning you go back out there, or whatever, what happens is these numbers are always changing. They shouldn't be changing, right? If I have a well-balanced system operating correctly, and my armor flex is good to go from point A to point B, and I'm not adding temperature to it once it leaves the evaporator coil, or I'm not dropping temperature once it leaves the evaporator coil, then my superheat should still be within the 12 to 18 range. The only thing that can drop it at that point is maybe the indoor temperature. If somebody cranked that thermostat down real low in combination with an air filter that maybe has more dirt built up on it, losing a little bit of CFMs, not boiling off as much, but I should still be within 12 to 18, maybe closer to that 12 range. However, you shouldn't be drastically changing. And so if you're seeing numbers that just don't make sense, it's because 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. It's because you're not taking 1 plus 1. There's other variables. And that's why when you're looking for 2, you can't get 2 if you're adding 1 plus 3, right? And so if things don't make sense, start looking at other things. Stop looking at the same thing, trying to make sense out of it, right? So pretty simple stuff. These drain lines, if good indication, if I didn't have any gauges and I just wanted to walk up just as a hands behind the back, observation, I would say, okay, everything's cold. I can touch the lines. They're cold. Let me go outside. Okay, everything's super cold. Okay, I can see that the ground is bone dry. That means my drain line must be building up water and backing up. But if I pull a cap off or something and I don't see any water backing up and I'm bone dry out here, that is an indication that you are draining inside that chase. And what could happen is when they originally put that drain line in there, it could have been in sections where one person outside was pushing that drain line. Somebody on the inside was pulling on the drain line. One starts to pull more than the other one's pushing, and the line starts to come apart. This guy says, hey, I'm good to go. The one in here says, hey, I'm good to go too. I got plenty. And they start making the connections. Well, now you have a section of pipe not connecting inside that chase. And now on day one, it happens because people put things together, they forget to glue them, they start pushing and pulling and tugging, and that it just happens. It's very common. That's why it's important to fill up your drain line, to prime the trap, which the trap would be from this point to this point, right? And that might even be 35 or 40 feet of 3/4 inch. You look at that area and that volume that it's going to take to fill that up, it might take 2 or 3 gallons of water to fill that up. You keep pouring water down there, if water's not coming out, then it simply means you're filling the chase up with water. And that would be your indication that your drain line has an issue. And if you don't take care of it pronto, immediately, then your next issue is going to be much bigger, and it's never going to be handled properly unless people clearly understand that water has to be removed out of the chase, right? And once that water is removed out of the chase, then possibly the drain line gets redirected, or maybe the copper just gets re-ran in a different direction altogether. Sometimes that's what has to happen. In most cases, if the chase is compromised and there's water in it, then what you probably want to do is abandon the chase. The drain line might stay there. Just take your copper and run it up, over, and back down, as long as you make sure that you have thicker wall armor flex. Here you might want to go 3/8 because it's kind of hard to push all this in there as it is. The drain line, the suction line, the liquid line, and a low voltage wire. So you don't want 1/2 inch wall on your pipe, because you're going to add an additional 1 inch on top of the diameter of the copper already. So between that might already be 7/8 of an inch, and then you're adding another 1 inch of armor flex, 1/2 inch on both sides. So now you have 2 inches there, plus you have the liquid line, plus you have 3/4 inches of PVC, and your chase is never easy to run all that through. So a lot of people just think, oh, I'm not going to run armor flex on my copper. So what happens is they wind up running no armor flex, and that's not good. So if you wind up pushing armor flex through there like you're supposed to, you don't have to go 1/2 inch wall. You can just go 3/8 wall. It makes things a lot easier. It takes about a little bit of that restricted area that's hard to push, and it gives you a little bit more opportunity to get it in there. Now, if you have to go up and over, I would recommend using 1/2 inch wall, just because in the chase it's not affected by sunlight. It's a cool environment. this chase is surrounded by concrete on one side and earth on the other. And so it's typically 72 degrees. That's very ideal for refrigerant lines to run through as long as the chase is empty of water, dry. But if it's going across a hot attic and down the side of a building, and those temperatures are never going to stay 72 degrees. They're always going to change, cold or hot, and you don't want that to add or take away from those values. So I would use 1/2 inch armor flex on your copper suction line. That way you're getting that accuracy of whatever you measure here, it being the same within a degree or so of what you're measuring here at the service valve. So very important. You want to make sure that your drain line's always draining. If it's not, and it's not backing up, then obviously, and your copper lines run through the chase, and I would say there's definitely water in the chase. And if you wanted to prove that theory, very simply, you take your clamp, you can take it off of whatever, plug it onto your meter. You can read the temperature here, okay? Record the number, right off the evaporator coil coming out of the cabinet, slide the armor flex back, clamp it again, read that number, see what that number is. There shouldn't be more than a degree or two. The reason why it shouldn't be any change, but if it's a couple of degrees, don't beat anybody up over that. But if we're talking like, 8, 9, 10 degrees, then those numbers are going to be, they're not always going to be 8, 9, or 10 degrees differential. That's enough for you to be worried about. If I'm only 2 degrees difference, then maybe a worst case scenario, that 2 degrees might turn into 10 degrees. But if I'm like starting off with 8 degrees differential, then maybe at night and on a rainy day and all these other conditions that can change, that may give me a bigger differential. Those numbers changing away from the direction you're trying to go. And so if I'm not draining, very good indication for you to measure the temperature on your liquid line here and here. Now, same thing on your your suction line. Same thing on your liquid line. If I'm coming out of here, you got to think about it. I'm coming out of here at a certain temperature, a pretty high temperature actually. It might be 96 degrees. Maybe when I came off my compressor, maybe I was 102 degrees coming off my compressor, but by the time I went through my condenser coil, my liquid line cooled that gas, or my liquid line was down to 96 degrees. So 102 to 96, that's a 6-degree subcool. Well, if I have 6-degree subcool, and then over here I have all of a sudden 12-degree subcool, well, how did I cool my liquid down further to give me a larger subcool, which is excellent for this coil? But if I'm 6 degrees coming in here or 4 degrees coming in here and I'm higher on this side, then I could expect to double prove that theory that suction line is going to be one temperature, right? But on the other side of that chase is going to be a lower temperature. So if I'm gaining subcool, right, through my chase, and I'm losing superheat through my chase, right, then there's water in the chase. And so, I can be draining perfectly fine, right? And I could still lose superheat through the chase and gain subcool through the chase. Both those things, by the way, you'll always be present. You're going to have a higher subcool on one side than the other, a lower superheat on one side than the other, and that just double confirms that my chase is full of water. But did that chase fill up with water from rainwater because people did not seal the chase with fill-a-foam? Is it drain line water? Did they not armor flex it, and maybe over the last decade it just sweated and filled it up with just enough to submerge the lines to where it was a different temperature and inside that chase, and anything that was higher than that was able to cool it down on the other side? There's a lot of things that can contribute to that water getting in the chase. But if you ever want to prove why is there water in the chase, how do I know that? You can just take your customer and you can say, look, I should be the same temperature here as I am here. I shouldn't be any more. All right. Look, I got a differential here and here, 6 degrees, 8 degrees, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, whatever it is. And I have the same over here. That just proves that there's water in the chase. And that is the theory. And so if I didn't have water coming out my drain line and I was able to see all that, then I would say definitely, yeah, we got water in that chase. And that water's got to come out of there. Again, the most important reason why that water has to come out of there is because we need vapor to come back to our compressor. Because if we don't have vapor coming back to our compressor, if we have liquid coming back to our compressor, we're going to lose oil and we will have a mechanical failure. And so I can never be at zero superheat, because zero superheat guarantees me to be just a no value pressure, meaning I don't know if there's liquid state or vapor state. All I know is I have pressure. Pressure can be 145 psi, but is that 145 psi vapor or is that 145 psi liquid? You don't know unless you can measure a superheat. Watch these other videos. We get into a lot of detail explaining that. There's a series of them. I told you in that last video I was going to release a video about water in the chase, because when I held up the evaporator coil in our classroom, I said very simply, you know, we're getting superheat on each one of these sections of coil, and it all comes right back, and we're going to measure that temperature, you know, right here, and that will give you the most accurate superheat value, right? Because that's the sum of every one of these. And the moment you go outside and you measure it outside, you shouldn't be a different temperature. Why would your temperature be different? Especially if your line is insulated. So I said in another video we would talk about how those numbers can change. That's this video. So I don't know where in the series of videos you're starting off at. Watch them all. That's how you level up. That's how you get good. Some of this stuff is very hard to explain to your customers. I get that. I understand it. Communication skills are very key in our industry, because anyone that's going to spend money has to have some type of idea of what you're talking about, or they're not comfortable spending money to fix their problem that they called you out for. So don't get frustrated with them if they don't understand. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to understand this stuff and be able to break it down very simply. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it at all. If you have a hard time understanding this video, watch it again. And you can also share it. And you can also show it. And those are the things that help us out too. We have a passion for this industry. We have a passion for sharing our information, our knowledge with the industry. It's our job to leave the industry better than we found it. I believe in as air conditioning has evolved with all the technologies, also educating about air conditioning has also evolved. So we have better ways of understanding that. We have more experience. There's so many platforms like this one that you're watching this on to be able to take that and share this video. Like our channel, give us that thumbs up. We need that. That supports our algorithm. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. When we release our next video, that notification is going to, let you know, hey, that video just got released. Sometimes we're not super consistent in releasing them every single week, but we do release them monthly, and sometimes release them every week, sometimes release 2 a week. We've done all that, but we get busy too because we're an air conditioning company. Our technicians, they watch this channel because if they can't get into class that day, it gives them an opportunity to, brush up on some of the knowledge. Very important. We're very big on that knowledge. We're very big on technical training. And a lot of this stuff is just dining room talk. This isn't stuff that you're really going to find in a textbook. So that's kind of a miracle to find this kind of information out there, which is why it's very precious to us to be able to put it out there for you to read, watch, listen to, however you're getting that knowledge. So share this with somebody else, subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up. We hope this helps you out. Level up, stay tuned, and stay safe.